Hello and welcome, fellow bookworms and film fans. Welcome to this month's book to film adaptation. So I will be looking at The Small Hand, written by Susan Hill. It was published in 2010 and then it was adapted to screen in 2019. Now, obviously, I will be discussing three things like I always do. How good is the book, how good is the film, and how well does the film take from the book. Now, when I say film, it was classed as a drama mini-series, but I watched it sort of like all as one, and when I bought it, it was literally just sort of like in one rather than two episodes. So I'm when I say film, that's what I'm saying. And obviously this will then tick off the end of October for the horror months. Because Susan Hill, man, we've done her before on this channel, and she's always got an interesting story to tell. So with this, with the film, we'll start with the film first. Now, it was okay. And I don't know if it's because I've become desensitized thanks to Michael, due to like, all the horror and the thriller and everything like that I'm watching. But it was an okay film. I just felt like at times it was trying to have an atmosphere that just didn't feel like it was there. So at some points, like, and you know the typical sort of like in any sort of like horror thriller, but like you've always got the final, like, even though you think the story's over and everything's hunky-dory and everyone's happy, you've got to have that final shot of being like, it's not over, it's going to continue. And I don't know, when you sit back and go, really? I mean, really? And it's annoying because it has such a good premise, and essentially it's about this guy that's a antiques dealer, and he mainly sort of like deals in books, and he's going off, and as he's going to this person's house to show them this fantastic manuscript he found, he takes a wrong turn and ends up at this like abandoned building, like these massive grounds. And as he's walking away, he sort of like feels like this small hand is taking hold of his hand and almost pulling him back to the house. And then he gets this pull to keep going back to it and keep seeing it and everything. And he buys it as well in the film. He full on buys it and moves into it, and he's just got this sort of like drawing of the property to him and this small hand. And obviously on a horror twist, it's sort of like the small hand starts off quite nice, and like the little child starts off quite nice, and then becomes a lot more sort of like vicious, as they tend to do. Starts off quite nice and then they become almost like a poltergeist. And it was annoying because I wanted more from it, because I love Susan Hill and I do like the Susan Hill adaptations that I've seen before. Like, I did really enjoy The Woman in Black, and I did that on my channel as well. But it just felt like it was missing something, and I don't know what it was, because when I was watching it and everything, I wasn't truly invested in the characters, in the storyline, and it just felt like I could probably watch it at midnight with the Bluetooth noise cancellation headphones and still be like, do you know what, I'm fine. So if you can watch it, but I probably wouldn't watch it, to be perfectly honest. It's not one that I'm probably going to rewatch. In fact, I have it on DVD, so if anybody wants it, reach out. I'll happily send it to you. I'm never going to watch it again. So it gets a 4 out of, no, do you know what? I'll be generous. It gets a 5 out of 10 from me. Now the book. Oh, the book. Now, Susan Hill, I've read so many of her books. I started with Woman in Black, which someone that I used to work with years ago, I'm talking when I was like 16 years old, lent me that book, and it's just started something, because she is just a fantastic, and it's sometimes where the story's going is not where you're expecting it to go. And she's even written like detective stories as well that I've read, and I've got loads of her books, and I'll constantly be buying more because she's a really good author. I thoroughly enjoy her work, and The Small Hand was no different, to be perfectly honest. Now, a similar sort of thing, I say similar sort of thing, this is the original. So you've got the detective dealer, antiques dealer even, goes out, takes a wrong turn, ends up at his house. But it's slightly different because in this book, he doesn't buy the house. He only returns to the house once or twice. And at one point he ends up in this beautiful monastery. And I think the reason I love the book as well is it keeps describing how gorgeous some libraries are. And like there's this monastery and it's got like apparently the most beautiful library with the most rare of texts and stuff. And you know what, a part of me, I mean, you know my love for books, so part of me is going, ooh, never mind the horror, give me the library. But it's I really enjoyed it because it follows him and he's just sort of like, he can't understand why suddenly he's getting this feeling of dread, and you know his older brother has had this feeling of wanting to, you know when you get that feeling where you just sort of like just want to step out into traffic, or you just want to sort of like throw yourself into water. Not everyone gets it, I'm not saying I do. What I'm saying is when you get that feeling where you just sort of like want to throw yourself into a dangerous situation, and his brother got it and then he's sort of feeling like he's got it now. And then I'm not going to tell you how the book ends, like I'm not going to tell you how the film ends, but it's such a, like it was just so well written, and it ended really well. And what I love is there's no sort of like in the woman in like other books that I've read by her, there is sort of like that final like, oh no, but in this one it's sort of like when it ended, and you know when you're like, okay, and it was so satisfying, it was so good, and it genuinely, I was like, oh my god. But again, it does go around like the fact that this little ghost has held on to, has attached itself to our main character, Adam. And you feel like sorry for Adam because you're just like, okay, right. It gets an 8 out of 10 for me, only because there are some points where I felt like it was, I like maybe unnecessary, but also I felt like I can't say about the ending. I can't. And honest to God, once I start describing the book and the film together in its entirety, I will be discussing the ending. So please, if you want to read it or watch the film, turn it off after I finish my book recommendation. But the ending, I kind of was a bit like, oh, it was satisfying. Well, it concluded, but I was like, oh. But yeah, so enough of that. So it gets an 8 out of 10 from me, but definitely, you know, give it a read. So now, spoiler alert, let's start with the plot. So in both, it starts with Adam, who's our main character, taking a wrong turn and ending up at an abandoned house. And while he's there, a small child's hand sort of goes into his, and he kind of feels this connection with the child and with the house. Now, in the film, he only goes as far as the gate, but in the book, he goes all the way up to the main house itself. In the film, he then heads out to the client's house after, and then to see his brother and wife, his brother's wife, obviously. And in the book, he then just goes jet setting all over the world, and we hear about how his client, like, you know, and he's sort of like all over the place, and, you know, he goes to his client's house again and back and forth. So it's not set solely in one area, unlike the film. Like, the book is set sort of all over the place. So in the book, a period of time passes before he then eventually goes back to try and find this house again and find out a bit more information about it. In the film, it's pretty much straight away. Like, he heads back. In fact, he stays with them, and he heads back to the house literally like the next day. He goes on a jog and he goes back to the house. So in the book as well, he's in London and pursuing a Shakespearean first folio, which, whew, big money that. When he encounters an experience that leaves him kind of full of fear because it made him want to drown himself in this water fountain. In the film, he's gone back to the house and followed an old lady who's vanished, and then he ended up feeling like he was drowning. So there's still sort of like the idea of like, he's got this fear of like, he feels like he's drowning and he wants to drown himself, and it makes no sense. So in the film, in both, he asks for his brother Hugo's advice about these occurrences due to his brother's predilection and dealing with something similar himself. And his brother Hugo is basically like, leave it, run, ignore it. You know, it's not the same thing, you know. So anyway, in the book, he's now heading to the monastery for the first folio, which is in a completely different country. And he encounters the small child on his drive there, and has a feeling of being thrown over the side of the mountain. So he's on like this really weird like mountainside, and he thinks he's hit this child, and it's not. It's the ghost of the child, because he can't see where it came from, can't see where it went. There's no body anywhere. And as he's looking over the edge, and it's this really sort of like steep drop, he feels like he wants to just throw himself off the edge. So in the film, he's now at this point decided to have decided to buy the house. He's also having an affair with Alice, who is the collector's wife. Now, in the book, this never happens. In the film, it's like a full-on, like, they've been having an affair for years. God knows. And he also sees more of the child and more of the woman who had owned it and died. He sees all of this in the film, and he doesn't really see it in the book. He sees the child once or twice, if that. So he's staying in the monastery at this point, in the book, and the child has urged him to drown himself again. So the monastery, like, they cleanse the garden, they cleanse his soul, they sort of like, they just listen to him, and he feels a lot calmer. And then, so in the film, he's now fully moved into the house, and he's learning about the past of the building, the grounds as well, and he encounters the dead previous owner a couple more times. And so in the book, he opens up to the monks about advice about what to do, and they sort of like be like, right, okay, well, this is what you need to do to cleanse yourself. And so in the book, he then goes to the house again at this point. So he's gone back. He's gone back to the house, because he's gone back to tell them about the first folio, and he encounters the child who tries to kill him again, and then he comes across the old woman who invites him into the house, and he thinks the old woman's living in the house. Now, it's never fully explained in the book if the old woman is alive and living in the house, or if she is literally a ghost that he has encountered. That's never really explained. So in the film, he's learnt that the child is the son of Denisa and had drowned, and in the book, it's the grandson of Denisa, who's the old lady, but also drowned. So in both, Denisa shows him a photo of Adam, his brother, and the dead boy. So obviously Adam's now going, what's going on? Like, did we know this child? And in the book, he collapses and is found by the Merrimans, who he was originally going to see. So this is obviously the client. So in the book, he's found that out. He goes, oh no, and he collapses, and then he's found by the Merrimans, who kind of take him in. In the film, at this point, the child has caused the death of Alice, who was staying the night with Adam in the house, because cheaters be cheating. And then in the book, after his encounter, he heads back home to London and then jet sets around the world again, doing all his collecting. And in the film, he tries to stay with his brother and his brother's wife, but is almost killed. He's saved by a friend of his brother and decides to confront the child in the house to find out what he wants with the brother's friend. In both, we learn that the brothers were at the house when the boy drowned, okay? And in the book, it just seemed as if it was an accident. But in the film, it's apparently a direct cause, because the boy was bullying Adam, and they both almost died. Hugo could only save one, so dragged Adam out, and unfortunately, the little boy died. So then in the book, this presence and the child and everything, and this need to drown himself, kind of disappears, and then we find out it's because Hugo has drowned. So this is in the book. In the film, Adam realizes that actually this little boy is never going to let up, and he goes and drowns himself. So drowning all around. So the book ends with Hugo sending a letter confessing to pushing the boy into the pool to drown, and taking over and literally throwing himself and killing himself so that Adam would be released from this little boy's grasp. The film ends with the child luring Hugo's child out of the house. So as I said, final sort of like, oh no, thing. So these narratives are very, very different. You do get the sort of like the small hand, the child that's drowned. However, the film stays in the house and the area, and, you know, more with like Adam sort of like exploring and finding out and stuff like that. And so whereas the film, it sort of, he jet sets all over. Like obviously he goes to the monastery. He's not constantly at the house. He doesn't even buy the house. The person who dies at the end as well is Hugo, the brother, because the brother deliberately drowned this little boy because he pushed him into the pool. Whereas in the film, they changed that up to Adam drowning because he was an indirect cause of the little boy drowning. I mean, essentially the only thing that's remained the same is a house is haunted by a child and potentially an old lady, and someone dies. So for me, the narrative gets a 2 out of 10. It's not close at all in any shape of the word. But of course, if you agree or disagree with anything that I say, please do leave it below in the comments. Thank you so much for your constant support. Thank you for subscribing, because you get alerted whenever a new video comes out. And I hope you've enjoyed my horror month, because it's not been all blood and guts. It's been more thriller and ghost stories. So I hope you've enjoyed these ones. Remember, I do film episodes very far in advance. So I am filmed currently up until sort of like the end of November. So if there is a book or a book to film adaptation that you'd like me to do, please leave it below in the comments. Please let me know, and I will add it onto my list, and then I will review it in due course. But thank you so much, and remember to always keep it contento.